Hi all, welcome to another episode of Labbing It. In today's video, we are going to migrate our Veeam server from 12.0 to 12.3. As it might suggest, we are a few additions behind, so we're going to go through that process of getting that uplifted. In addition, we're actually going to migrate the Veeam server to a brand new operating system currently running on 2012 R2. We're going to move that to server 2016. And sort of part of that process will include backing up the existing configuration database, which resides on a PostgreSQL server. And we're going to restore that into the new server and actually restore it to a full-blown SQL Server instance. So we'll go through that process as well. Once that's all complete, we'll ensure Veeam is operational. All our backup jobs are still available. All our infrastructure components are available and updated. And then we'll just quickly go through at a high level some of the new features that have been introduced since 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3. So let's get into it. So here we are in our Veeam 12 server. So this is our existing server, running version 12.0 on our Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system. If you have a look just up the top here, if you've been following my videos, you'll know that I'm using VMware Workstation in my lab. And I guess for all intents and purposes, all these virtual machines you see listed up the top here are my so-called physical machines in my environment. And then I also have a virtual environment, and that's from inside here. Once we just log back in, and here you'll see I've got two vCenters, two separate data centers, a Melbourne data center, a Sydney data center. Each data center or each cluster served by 3 ESXi hosts. The Melbourne data center is kind of my production environment. The Sydney data center is kind of my DR environment. And basically my VBR server, which is kind of a physical server, sits in the Melbourne data center. Just for everyone's understanding, I am running a layer 2 stretch network between these two data centers. So everybody is running on the 192.168.10.0/24 network. So if we did happen to do some failover work, which we will do in a later video, we don't need to do any re-IPing or anything like that. So before we migrate, the one thing that I like to do is to upgrade my existing Veeam server to the current version. So on my new server, which is going to live as a virtual machine in my Sydney cluster, I've got it here sort of pre-prepared, SID VBR. That's going to be running 12.3. I like to get this up to 12.3 as well. So I'm going to go through that process first before we start the migration process and preparing our brand new server. So just quit out of here. First things first, we need to disable our existing backup jobs. We do have a transaction log backup running at the moment, so we'll need to wait for that to finish. And then we'll close out of the console. Not everybody, there's not necessarily always a reason to upgrade this to 12.3 as well. The only reason why I'm doing it is that my 12.0 server is running PostgreSQL. On my new SID VBR server that's going to run 12.3, I'm actually going to use a SQL instance. And I've found in the past, I think that it's best if you're going to do a migration, is to upgrade the existing server to the latest version, just to make sure that we've got full compatibility of that configuration database when we do a backup here and we import it into the new server. So that's all done. So I'm going to close out the console. I'm going to go open up to my share where I've got the Veeam 12.3 software, which is now the Veeam Data Platform 12.3, which comes with Veeam 1 and Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. I'm going to hit the run. Now, upgrades like this are generally straightforward. upgrade Veeam backup and replication. It's not really giving me any other options here, so it's pretty straightforward. Always best to read the release notes from the Veeam website when you are doing an upgrade, just to make sure that you're fully compliant. I mean, Veeam, the software itself is probably not going to let you upgrade unless you are, so I think you do need to be on version, a flavor of version 11 anyways to upgrade to 12.3. I'd be very surprised if there's too many Veeam environments out there that are running, say, a version 10 or an early release of version 11. What I might do, just through these parts here, because this can be quite slow on my lab equipment, I'll just pause the videos till we get to the next section. Okay, so that took just a few minutes. So this is generally straightforward. So we just accept the license agreement, get a little bit of an overview of what's going to be upgrading, what's going to be upgraded. The remote components are things like the proxy servers, repository servers, and the likes. I like to do this after an upgrade, so I'm just going to leave that unchecked. But if you wanted to just get it all over and done with, you could tick this box and it will go away and upgrade those components automatically. Upgrading the components don't require any reboot or anything like that. It's usually a pretty straightforward process, but I like to see what it's going to upgrade, so I'll do that after we've done the actual VBR upgrade. Okay, next. I've got my license details here. Don't need to add a license file here. It already knows what type of license we have. So I'll hit next. And the little system configuration check. Now I've been using local system account for my service account for Veeam. That works fine. I'm using PostgreSQL on this particular server, so don't really need to do anything different here. So I'll just hit next. Not going to change anything, just keep everything as normal. Just need to provide the PostgreSQL credentials, which we would have created when we set up PostgreSQL originally back in the at the beginning, because in a previous video we were using VBR on a SQL Express server. We migrated that to a new server using PostgreSQL, and we configured and installed PostgreSQL manually as part of that process. So we ended up creating an account, and it's just going to tell us that the database will be upgraded, which we are happy to do. Just lets us know that there's probably some changes between 12.0 and 12.3 that might cause some compatibility problems. Nothing here that I'm going to be really concerned about. And again, this is just purely to upgrade to 12.3. We're going to take a configuration database backup and move across to 12.3 now on our new server. Ready to upgrade, and away we go. I'll stop the recording here. This will take probably 20 minutes or so to complete, but as you can see, it was pretty straightforward. I'll let this run and we'll rejoin at the end. Okay, so that has completed. Now I've just accidentally hit the OK button, so I've missed the upgrade complete window, but all is well. We'll just log into the server now. So it took probably about 20 minutes to complete, so that's not too bad. Okay, so we're just greeted with a message just saying that obviously the latest version of 12.3 brings some new features, or a new feature in particular, the backup of Microsoft Entra ID. We'll quickly talk about that at the end of this video, just some of the new features that we are seeing, because there are some major changes between 12 and 12.3. Oh, okay, and the next thing to pop up is just to tell me that there are some components that need updating. So my Linux repository, my proxy server, and some components on my VBR server. So let's hit the apply. This is generally quite quick and non-evasive. Okay, I just paused again. That took just a few minutes. The proxy server needed a little bit of extra time for an upgrade, but we got all the 3 ticks, so all components are now upgraded. I can go ahead now and resume the jobs. Now I'm probably going to come back here and disable these pretty shortly anyways, because we are going to start the migration process now. But I just want to make sure that that the backup jobs are happy to go back into enabled mode, and I think I'll feel even more comfortable once I see that transaction log job kicking off, which it looks like it is. Oop, bit of screen tearing, but anyways, that looks okay. Cool. All right, I'll let that run in the background, and we'll commence the next phase of this migration. Okay, so let's head over to our virtual environment and to our new prepared virtual machine that's going to host the Veeam server. And I've already logged in. So the existing VBR server is a domain joined machine. In our new server, we're going to follow some, I guess, sort of recommended or best practice from a security point of view, and leave our VBR server off the domain. So we're going to run it as a work group, and I've already IP'd the server. So that's all good. I've given it the server a name, and what I'll do is I'll just jump onto our DNS server and just double check. I don't know if I've got given the capabilities to automatically register. I'm going to say no. I reckon only domain join machines will register, so I'm just going to add a record. For our new server back here. One thing I like to do, just a little bit of security hardening as well, is I don't like to use the standard local administrator account. So I'm going to come in here and create a new user. I'm just going to call it VBR admin. Provide a password. Don't want to change the password at next logon. As a matter of fact, I'll tick those 2 boxes. Password never expires and user cannot change password. And done. And then I'm just going to quickly sign out. And sign in with the new account. Ooh, I made one mistake. I didn't assign the VBR admin to the local administrator group. So let's quickly just jump back in and do that. Sorry. Here we go. Apply. Okay, that didn't cost us much time. Cool. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the ISO now. I'm almost certain I'm not going to be able to mount the ISO using this machine without being domain joined. I think I've got some security in place, but I will give it a quick go. Let's try that again. There we go. I'll give it a quick whirl, see if it does work. I think I'm going to get... Yeah, always happens. That's alright. I have to probably investigate that. The best bet for me is just to do it this way. I'm just going to create a map drive. And then password. And then I'm going to run up PowerShell. I'm going to go here. Actually, it doesn't really matter. Mount disk image file. Z Veeam data platform ISO, and it bounced that way for some reason. So just not through the Explorer. So now if we open up Windows Explorer, we should see the mounted data platform. Okay, so what we're going to do obviously here now is install a sort of a greenfield setup of the Veeam data platform 12.3. So we're going to come straight into here. Yeah, I'll probably do several little pauses on the recording here whilst we're getting this booted up, because this can take just a little bit of time. Okay, install. So now it's because it's a fresh installation, it's giving us a few different options here from the Veeam data platform package. We are installing Veeam backup and replication 12.3. And greeted with a very similar box. Install Veeam backup and replication. Obviously we could install Enterprise Manager and the console if we wanted to, depending on where we are with our Veeam installation. Generally, you're probably installing the console on a different machine somewhere so that you can access the VBR server, so you don't always necessarily have to log onto the VBR server to gain access to the actual Veeam console. Okay, that took a little while, but now we're at the license agreement, so let's go through this process. So here I will need to provide the license file. I keep that in here under my Veeam folder. be this one. And next. Okay, so here it's just going to enable missing features. These would be features relating to the Windows operating system. The good thing about the Veeam software, it will just go ahead and do all this automatically. The only thing we may need to do is a reboot before we continue on. Hopefully not, but we'll just see. I may just pause it here as well because this probably take a little bit of time. So service account, here I just use local system account. So just to reiterate, this is actually going to be a requirement for the way that I'm setting this server up, because I'm going to be using SQL Server using Always On, and because this machine is not domain joined, we need to use local system account here. So here I'm just going to change it now. So by default, and generally speaking, there's absolutely no issues using PostgreSQL. As a matter of fact, it's probably most recommended. The software will install PostgreSQL on this server, and there's nothing much else you have to worry about. You get all the sort of the performance capabilities of pretty much nearly a full-blown SQL server would be. It's such a massive improvement over SQL Express, which I have seen in many production environments, but now that PostgreSQL is available, that's probably the standard go-to these days. But and for no reason other than just to show how to do this in a video, I'm using Microsoft SQL Server. I've got a previous video of how I migrated from SQL Express to PostgreSQL. So here we'll just go to Microsoft SQL. Here I need to use my add my SQL Server instance. Now I'm not using a dedicated SQL Server. I am using an always on environment, SQL environment. So here you put your listener, which is SQL always on AL for my listener. So that's so when you set up I don't know if you're familiar with setting up always on SQL environments, but you set it up. You need to set up what they call a listener listener name that's dedicated with an IP address and a port number. And I'm not using the standard the default port number. I'm using 1764. So SQL AOAL 1764, and the database name I'm happy with just Veeam backup. And the other thing is that I am using again, this is not domain joined. So if you're not using a domain joined environment and you want to use SQL Server, you have to use SQL Server authentication. And I already have an account on my SQL servers called Veeam. So I've got two servers in my always on environment, and on each of those two servers I've created this local account with the exact same permissions. And if you need to know what SQL permissions you do need to provide, there's some the documentations on the Veeam website. Okay, so that's pretty happy to go. I don't need to change the data locations. I'm happy with those three locations just being default. They do recommend to place the right cache on the SSD drive. So if this was maybe a physical server, or if you're using VMware with sort of like a tiered storage setup, you might want to put create a dedicated volume just for your right cache that lives on SSD drives. Everything in my environment's SSD, so it doesn't really matter where I go. Tells me I don't have. Oh, actually, that's okay. We could have just went ahead and still installed, but I actually did expand the disk on here, so I might just do that now. So now there's actually 100 gig on this disk. What I might do, I'll just say no, and just hit next and see if it recomplains or if it's happy. Well, I think it's going to be happy. Port configuration. I don't think there's any need to make any changes here. This is a dedicated VBR server. I'm not running anything else. Certainly wouldn't be using anything with the same port, so I'm happy to just keep them as normal. And we get a little bit of an overview of what's about to happen. So just to reiterate, we are using a local system account. We are using Microsoft SQL Server for the installation, and we have targeted our Always On SQL environment, which you provide the listener address along with the port number if it's non-standard. And I'm happy with that to keep that checked. And let's go with install. Now, given that this is a fresh install, this is going to probably take a little bit longer than the upgrade of our existing VBR server. So again, I'm just going to just stop the recording just here, and we'll pick it up once we get to the end. And we're done. So 12.3 successfully installed. Let's open it up. Just make sure everything's all okay inside. Obviously, VBR installs with you know, well, it installs itself as a repository, as a proxy server, and so forth. So when we restore the configuration database in here, so it's going to wipe out all that configuration, and we'll see. Well, what we should see is everything, all the configurations that we have on our old server on our new server. While that's happening, I might just flick back to our old server. Now's the time where I will disable all the jobs again and wait for this transaction log job to complete. There we go. And what I'll do in here is take a configuration backup. Gee, I don't know why I always like to move that screen and then cause that tearing. So this has already been in operation. It's automatically configured to run every day. We keep up to 10 restore points of the database, and it goes to a local repository on this server. It may not be the best way to do it. Probably best to have it stored somewhere else, maybe on a different site. And at the end of the day, the configuration backup is only beneficial to save time, right? Like if we lost the configuration database, but we had to build a brand new server and we didn't have a database to restore, we could still reconfigure configure a new server with all the same settings. It would just be a manual process. As long as we've got the repository servers that we can access, everything should be just fine. But this just simplifies the restore process, having this configuration backup. I also use encryption, so this will allow the usernames and passwords within this backup to be saved inside the backup file. So when we do a restore, we should have our usernames and passwords. They should come across without encryption, usernames and passwords. So what's in our credential manager, they don't actually come across. I think the user accounts come across, but not the passwords. We would have to re-enter all the passwords. So in here, we've got a bunch of user accounts, and the passwords are stored in here. And for every time we do a backup, those usernames and passwords get stored in an encrypted backup file. So all we're going to do here is just run a manual backup of the configuration database. So we're just hitting backup now. My environment's quite small, so this process should be fairly quick. And it's just saving to my local repository, my local Veeam repository. Okay, successful backup. And we can just check that here in our repository. This is the location. And we have this manual backup here, 1:43 p.m. So that's the file that we're going to copy over to our new server and restore it in. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'll jump back onto my new server. I wonder if it's better served if this was, do we get a bigger screen? Is this like a VMware tools? No, oh, that is bigger. Anyways, okay. Okay, so we have basic infrastructure components here that are being configured. So when we do a restore, we're going to have to just go back quickly and check through all this and make sure it's all configured as we expected. So let's go to that now. As a matter of fact, first things first, let's get that configuration file. So that's on my Mel VBR server. It's on the D drive. I have to authenticate. And jump into here. Here's that backup file. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'll just copy it to the desktop of this machine. And this is the process generally speaking. Bring up the menu. So back in configuration backup. And down the bottom we have a restore option. And what we are doing is migrating. So we're not actually restoring a configuration maybe back to an existing server. We are actually migrating, so we can choose the migrate option. It's asking where's the repository for this file. It's actually not sitting in the repository, it's just sitting on the server and just on our desktop. So let's bring that in. Then it's just going to analyze the contents. It gives us some options here. And as you can see, the original database is a PostgreSQL. I'm going to be changing it to a Microsoft SQL server. Now, just as a quick note, and I know I didn't bring this up maybe properly at the beginning, but one of the key reasons to upgrading the original server to 12.3 was to ensure that this would be supported. Now, I'm almost certain if it's 12.0 and your new server is 12.3 and you're coming from a PostgreSQL server and you actually want to change it to SQL Server, you would probably get a non-supported option here. When you go to restore a 12.0 configuration database in 12.3, this won't work. So that's one of the reasons why I just like to upgrade the existing server first to the newest version, if it's at all possible, and then do the restore on my brand new server on the same version. So that's really good. So now we'll just push along. Now it wants my configuration backup password. So this is the encryption password. So that's the encryption password here on this server. So when we're doing our configuration backups, this is the password that it's asking for. So you should have that stored somewhere. Validate, happy. So I could go with PostgreSQL. I'm not. I'm going to go with SQL Server. It's going to know the instance to which we want to install to based on the fact that we installed this 12.3 with the same details. Veeam backup. So it's going to should just overwrite the existing database, and we know that we need to use SQL authentication because we are on a non-domain joined VBR server. I'm just going to add the password in there. I'm not sure if it was already saved, but just in case it is not. So just to reiterate, the instance name here is because I'm using Always On, is my Always On listener name, and with a comma, I provide the non-standard port number that I'm using in my environment. Let's do a connection. So the database Veeam backup already exists, so it's just going to let us know that all the current contents of that database is going to be lost. Do you want to proceed? And I'd go yes. And then we just get an array of options here of what we would like to restore in terms of sort of the ancillary data. So I'm going to restore everything. The Veeam user interface is open, so it would like to close it. So happy for it to do so. This might take a little moment, so I might just pause it here. Okay, so it's just going through the process now. Certainly do like to see the green circle and white tick. May just give it another quick pause. and we're done. So I'll hit next. So here we just get up, we get all these credentials. Now I shouldn't have to put any usernames and passwords here. I don't think I should anyways. So I'm just going to leave it all okay. But if this was a non-encrypted restore, then I would say that yes, you would have to put in the passwords. But I'm just going to check this out. Unless anything's changed, usernames and passwords should still be there. And the same for our cloud credentials. Obviously, we've been doing a little bit of backup to S3 by the looks of it in a previous video, maybe. Just starting up all the services. And we're good to go. I'll just uncheck that. I'm going to just manually open it from the icon on the desktop and finish. Okay, let's open up the console. Okay, and we're kind of greeted with that same message about the new feature of backing up Microsoft Entra ID. We'll just quickly, we won't go through the process of doing any testing with that at this stage, or as part of this video, but we'll just quickly have a look at those options in a moment. Before I do anything, I'm just going to check our backup infrastructure and see what we've got here. So things are going to be a little bit different. So we've still got our proxy server, and now we've got this default backup proxy and VMware backup proxy for SID VBR. We've still got our hardened repository on our physical Linux repository. Now here it's tried to bring the default repository over to SID VBR in D drive /backups, and if we have a look in here, I don't think we've got a D drive. Well, we do, but it's for the virtual DVD drive, so we need to fix that up. So that's one thing to fix. Our scale out repository looks okay. One thing I'm going to check is make sure that that there is still connectivity to it, even though we can see it. Given that this uses the one-time password for connectivity, I want to double check to make sure that there's still access to those repositories. We've got our vCenter servers under managed services. We've got our Melbourne vCenter and our Sydney vCenter. I think that they look all good. As a matter of fact, what I'll do just for fun, I might just do a quick rescan. If there's any sort of communication issue with the vCenter server, it's going to tell me here. Looks okay, I think. And yep, this all looks okay. And here we have our Linux. So this is the one that I do want to try. I just wonder whether or not access to this has come across okay. That looks like it's all good. And perhaps that's due to the encryption in our configuration database backup. So one thing to fix here is just this server, this repository. I'm just going to change that. I think I can change the location. No, you cannot change the location. That's okay. So what I'll do is just create a new repository, a direct attached storage, Microsoft Windows, and I'm just going to call it default Veeam repository, because that's kind of what it is. Not sure why I hit the populate button there. Generally, we don't need to do that. And then create a path. Yep, I'm just going to put it there, C drive backup. And I'm happy with the default settings. We're not actually using this for actual workload backups. We just use this just to store the configuration backup. It's okay. Mount server's fine. Instant recovery right cache folder is fine. And we hit apply. And done. Now, let me just see. I don't think I can remove this because the configuration backup, I think, is targeting it, even though it's not really a proper active repository. So I'm just going to come up here into configuration backup and going to change that to here. Everything else is the same. Hit OK. Let's try and remove this one now. Looks happier to do so. And let's check our storage infrastructure. So we've got our HP store virtual, which is the main data store, which serves as the main data stores for our ESXi environments. And we also have a NetApp ONTAP setup as well, which we're going to use very shortly for some Veeam recovery orchestrator work. And tape infrastructure now, this may be offline because Mel VBR hosts your VBR. So this was granted I guess you could say, a physical server, this old Mel VBR server. And here you can see that it was also a tape server as well, which had a iSCSI connection to a virtual tape library called Meltape. So what we need to do is move that functionality across to the new server. But what I might do, and I think I might just do this in a separate scenario, is create a potentially like a proxy server in my Sydney environment and configure it as a tape server and then join it up that way, because I don't want my VBR server connecting to anything else directly. So I'm just going to leave that as is. That needs to be fixed, but I'll fix that up in at a different time. So for here, I will now kick off the jobs again, except for my tape jobs because the tape is not ready. So let's go through this. And like always, we should see the transaction log backup kick off. And it's looking like it's going to do that. And just so that I'm kind of happy that things are working, I might just kick off a backup job. Actually, what I want to ensure is now that my VBR server is in Sydney, I want to make sure that I'm using the proxy server in Melbourne so that we're not sending data to and from our two sites. So here backup proxy is automatic, and given the fact that we run a stretched layer 2 network, there is a chance that this job might use SID VBR, which is located in Sydney now, as the proxy server to back up workloads that are in our Melbourne data center,
targeting a repository that's in our Melbourne data center. So what would happen is data would be sent over the link to be processed in Sydney and then sent back to be stored in Melbourne. So we don't want to do that. We want to continue to use our Melbourne proxy server. That way everything stays in Melbourne. And I'll go through and update the other jobs, but I just want to give this a quick test run. Most importantly, I just want to make sure that that repository is available. Even though we did do a rescan, it looked like it was successful. I'm just going to kick a manual backup of this job. And see if we get any failures. I don't think it will take too long to kick off. Here we go, creating VM snapshot. And as long as we are writing data, I'm going to be happy. Oh, looks pretty good. Not very fast, but I don't think there's much change. So we'll use change block tracking, but I don't think there's much change that it's going to require any decent speeds. So we are definitely writing data, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so I'll leave that to run as is. And what we'll do now, we'll just quickly have a look at some of the new features between 12 and 12.3. So up here, we've got a new option here called malware detection. This is probably one of the most prominent new features in the Veeam software. Basically, Veeam's now got the capabilities to do some scanning of your backup files, doing some analysis, and also scanning files as they're being backed up as well. So there's a few new cool features, and it's in here is where you come in and just quickly configure that up. At the moment, I think there's some things are just off by default, but essentially I would enable this. Now just bear in mind that there is a bit of a CPU hit to your proxy servers when you enable the inline entropy analysis. So basically, as data is being processed, we're doing some analysis on those backups. So I'm just gonna tick the box anyways, because that's what I'd like to have it on anyways. I think this is you do need to have a certain level of licensing to be able to turn this feature on. We've got file detection, so they're on by default. We've got the ability to update malware definitions automatically. So I'm going to leave these on. Signature detection by default, it's set up to bring your own antivirus. I'm going to use the Veeam Threat Hunter, which comes with Veeam. So it's going to update its signatures on I think a few times a day. I'll just say that a few times per day, and automatically update the Veeam server. Incident API, perform a quick backup upon receiving an external event, so it can just trigger an out-of-band backup of a machine as soon as an external threat detection engine notifies of an infection. So that's a pretty cool, nifty feature if you want to turn it on. and then you just got your basic notifications. I think if you don't do anything here, just global notifications take precedence. So this is a really cool new feature that Veeam's brought out. This was actually introduced some time ago. I think it was part of the 12.1 release. But yeah, super. Um, it's such a super inclusion to what we're already doing with Veeam. So we're not only just worrying about our backups and our recoveries, but we're also now doing some additional testing of what it is that we are backing up, and ensuring that that our backup files are consistent and safe and so forth. Any changes or variants to the norm will get flagged as a potential threat. Okay. Another cool feature, KMS servers. So if you no longer want to manage all your encryption passwords, you can now use support KMS servers as a method to managing those encryption passwords. That's a really another cool feature, especially in those large scale environments. If you've got 50 different backup jobs, 100 different backup jobs, potentially running all sorts of different encryption keys, you can use KMS to manage those instead. Really cool feature. And if we scroll down to here, the other big feature, which is a release of 12.3, is the ability to back up your Microsoft Entra ID accounts, groups, and so forth. So this is where you configure that process up here by adding in your tenants and so forth. I'll definitely go through this in a different video. I've yet to actually use it myself since it's been released. I haven't had a customer that's requested it. I've had conversations, so probably going to be doing it in the very near future. And once I've got a little bit of experience behind me, I will definitely come back and do a video of that as well. And I guess lastly, just the security and compliance analyzer is a really cool thing to review on a regular basis. Make sure that your VBR server and environment um, is following sort of the best practices. As you can see, my environment not so good, um, but at least this is really informative. And whilst I don't think most organisations that I come across can't tick every box here. There's probably one reason or another that we can't do everything, but the aim here is to get as much as close to 100% best practice as we possibly can. And this is a really cool tool and a reminder just to continually check and make sure that everything's compliant. And if for any reason something pops up, at least here you can see what you need to action and work out a way to resolve. All right, I think I'll leave it at that. So that completes the our task for migrating Veeam to a new service. So just to recap, we were running an existing VBR server on 2012 R2, running version 12. We've built a new server 2016 environment, and we've migrated the configuration database from our old 12.0 to our new 12.3. And we've sort of just done a bit of a recap on the new features, or some of the new features that have been included in the most recent releases. But that's it. Thank you very much. Hope that was informative, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.